Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. In this edition, Crimea now, the territory seized by Vladimir Putin from Ukraine, or the state that decided it no longer wanted to be part of a Ukraine leaning towards the West and towards Europe. Whichever version you choose to believe, big changes have been taking place in Crimea since it was declared Russian 6 months ago. Official documents, currency, the public sector, banks, all now Russian. Was Putin answering the plea of the people, or was it a land grab of strategic military importance? Are the people relieved to be Russian, or keeping quiet, fearing their reaction? And is there more simmering pro-Russian separatism set to boil over? Our reporters Zenia Bolshakova and Veronica Dorman have been to Crimea to find out. This is their report.
On the 9th of May 2014, Russia celebrated Victory Day, a commemoration of the USSR's victory over Nazi Germany. On this sacred day for Russians, a big parade was organized in the Crimean city of Sevastopol, a symbolic show of force and Vladimir Putin's first official visit to annexed Crimea.
2014 will go down in history as a year when people living here made a clear choice to be part of Russia.
Crimea had been part of Ukraine for 60 years. But last spring, and with the complicity of local militias, Russian soldiers took over the peninsula. They helped organize a referendum that was considered illegal by the international community. The day after the vote, Crimea and the port of Sevastopol became part of the Russian Federation. This building used to belong to the Ukrainian administration. Today, it's the Russian Naturalization Office.
We have opened over 300 of them all over Crimea to facilitate the process for our citizens.
These hallways have been packed for months.
New passports are sorted in alphabetical order. Every day, around 20,000 documents are given out across Crimea.
Valery came here today to collect his new ID.
Check that everything is correct. Your first and last name, your date of birth.
What do you need this passport for?
Well, first of all, because I'm a Russian citizen now, I voted for Russia at the referendum. I also need this to change the license plates on my car, get a new retirement certificate, and so on. Everything begins with the passport.
More than 1.5 million Crimeans have become Russian citizens since the start of May.
I'm Russian, you see, from head to foot. I've lived in Ukraine for 31 years, but this year, after 31 years, I'm going back to Russia.
And that's a feeling that's widespread here in Crimea. People don't talk about annexation. Many refer to becoming part of Russia as returning home. That's a slogan personally coined by Vladimir Putin, and it's becoming part of how Crimeans themselves view what happened.
When Putin made his big speech here, I was very moved, because he said that we, the Crimean people, had reminded the rest of Russia what it meant to be Russian.
Larissa was born here, and like many, she says she's happy with the new status quo. She used to care very little for politics, but now she's a fervent patriot.
These flags have flooded the stores ever since the referendum, when people were free to say, yeah, we've won. Now these are the most popular items for sale.
Larissa's already received her Russian passport. She also traded in her Ukrainian SIM card for a Russian one. These days, she spends much of her time Russifying the entire contents of her wallet, including her membership cards.
Good morning, ladies. I am a member of your book club. I would like to know what has changed now that we're part of Russia.
Nothing. Your card still works in the new system.
Just like any other business in Crimea, this bookshop had to register with the Russian tax authorities to stay open.
We're in a transitional period right now, and we have to change how we operate.
Do you still sell books in Ukrainian?
No, not anymore.
And that's hardly surprising. In the past few months, the symbols of the former state have been disappearing. The Russian ruble has completely replaced the hryvnia, and drivers have taken off their Ukrainian license plates. Crimea has embraced its new nationality with enthusiasm. The 2 million people living here now set their clocks to Moscow time, and the tricolored flag is everywhere. The government building also bears Russian colors. Inside, the Russian coat of arms, the double-headed eagle, has replaced the Ukrainian trident. Sergei Aksyonov played a big part in the separation from Ukraine and unification with Russia. Today, he's governor of Crimea.
Let me give you this document. It confirms that the government of Crimea is now registered with the Russian tax authorities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We weren't operating legally without this piece of paper. Now everything is in order. As long as the tax services recognize us, we're okay.
Of course, this is an important document. It's like a birth certificate. Today, thanks to this formality, the government of Crimea is officially born.
These administrative successes happen on a daily basis. During this transitional period, Aksyonov goes from meeting to meeting, signing hundreds of acts and documents relating to pensions, budgets, and the penal code. Everything is quickly being Russified to make the unification with Russia both impossible to reverse and impossible to question.
We don't know what will happen now. We don't know how to live. It's the unknown. It's very hard to make plans for the future. All this is strange for us, unacceptable. We are Ukrainian. We want to live under the Ukrainian flag for Ukraine. We wanted Russia to leave us alone.
These activists met last winter during protests against the annexation of the peninsula. But they're no longer allowed to demonstrate. Russian law restricts people who disagree with the official line from gathering and expressing their opinion. In Crimea, the colors of Ukraine are effectively forbidden.
It's better not to walk around with this kind of banner. It seems they can send you to prison for 5 years if you do.
In the eyes of the Russian justice system, saying that Crimea belongs to Ukraine is a call for separatism. Some of the most vocal activists have already been arrested.
Of course we're scared, but we can't all emigrate. Someone has to stay.
We feel that we're under psychological pressure. This aggravated chauvinism and intolerance isn't normal. It has never been like that here in Crimea. There is a wave of hatred against Ukrainians. I've already had someone ask me, when are you all going to die?
They share the feeling that they're foreigners in their own country. We drive to Bakhchisarai, the main center of the Crimean Tatar population. They, too, are worried about being placed under Moscow's control.
You know, for 300 years, the entire history of relations between the Crimean Tatars and the Russian Empire, later the Soviet Union, has been a negative experience. When we saw Russian armed soldiers, we were all in shock. We thought it was 1944 all over again.
Stalin deported the entire Tatar population from Crimea in 1944, accusing them of collaborating with the Nazis. Naj Femi campaigns for the rights of the community. Born in Uzbekistan, she returned with her family at the start of the 90s. That's when the Ukrainian authorities let the Tatars move back to their homeland and revive their religion, their culture, and their traditional handicrafts.
Of course, Ukraine has its flaws. It's not a perfect state. But it is far more developed than Russia as far as democracy and civil liberties are concerned. In the 23 years of living under Ukraine's rule, we, the Crimean Tatars, got used to being free.
elders in the community are skeptical these freedoms will last. The main leaders of the Tatar assembly, known as the Medjilis, have been banned from entering Crimea. But a rift has appeared in the Tatar community over what steps to take next.
Some members of the Medjilis chose to be part of the new government. Our Tatar brothers are beginning to collaborate. Some are even very pro-Russian. They say, at last we have returned to Russia. But we do not recognize it. We consider that Russia has occupied Crimea.
But faced with this new reality, the Tatars adapt as best they can. Most have taken Russian citizenship. Mrs. Lilia, who's an important figure in this neighborhood, is one of them.
We have lived under Russian governance before. It was the USSR. I was born in the USSR. We are accustomed to this life. We love Ukraine, but Russia is okay too. Thank God we receive our pensions like we used to. The state has not let us down. We don't feel excluded.
She now gets around 160 euros. That's twice more than she used to get from the Ukrainian state. But prices have gone up as well. Everything from electricity to water and food used to come from Ukraine. It's far more expensive to import these from Russia, which has no land access to the peninsula. Even the most enthusiastic supporters of unification, like Larissa, admit that the transition is not always easy. The advertising agency she works for is going through hard times.
Everything's very difficult business-wise. I'd even say that what's come out of it is really bad. All the ties with Ukraine have been broken off. Our Ukrainian clients don't come to us anymore. The same goes for the suppliers. As for the Russians, they're coming into our market, but very slowly.
For Larissa and her husband Gennady, all these difficulties are a necessary evil. They think what really matters is that Crimeans made their own choice.
I want to show you some pictures. We call it Crimean Spring, the time before and after the referendum. We did not accept the Maidan protest. They were screaming in the name of the entire country that they wanted to live differently, to get rid of Yanukovych. But nobody asked us, like they didn't ask the people of eastern Ukraine. And when the people on Maidan eventually won, I thought to myself, this is not my country.
When the referendum was over, it was a real relief. Of course, no one is going to pamper us. It's going to be hard. But at least now we have something to live for. We have a future.
But what is their future? Crimea is geographically cut off from Russia and politically cut off from Ukraine. The international community considers it occupied territory. Looking at the abandoned Riviera and empty beaches that used to be so popular with tourists, it's hard to escape the feeling that the transition period here could be a long, drawn-out affair.
And our reporter Veronica Dorman joins us now from Moscow. Veronica, thank you very much for that report. Are the people of Crimea, do you think, happy with their situation? Or are there some who would, quite frankly, still prefer to be part of Ukraine?
Well, most of the people in Crimea and most of those that we have talked to are very happy with the situation. They have really wanted this. They're proud to be part of Russia now. They have voted massively at the referendum to join Russia. But some groups are against, and they didn't vote. They boycotted the referendum, and mainly the Crimean Tatars, which is a community that represents 12% of the population of the peninsula. And this community has a complicated relation with Russia historically and with the Soviet Union. They have been deported, so Russia symbolizes repression for them. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they managed to build a good relationship with the Ukrainian state, and they fear now that the Russian state might not respect them in the same way. There are also people who supported the Maidan in Kiev and who did not want to join Russia, who wanted to remain in Ukraine, but these people form today a silent and a frightened minority.
So not as straightforward as maybe some people in Moscow would like it to be. There is obviously a very strong pro-Russian feeling in Crimea. Do you see a possibility of, at some stage, an attempted link-up with those in the east of Ukraine, Donetsk, Luhansk?
Well, the Crimean population is very pro-Russian, so those are normal people. They're not activists, they're not fighters, they're just normal people who support Russia. In the local government, the people also were of great support to Russia, and during the referendum we have seen people from Moscow helping them, political experts and consultants helping them organize the reunification with Russia, and those people have also been noticed in the so-called republics of Donetsk and Lugansk around the leadership of the rebellion. And some fighters, some volunteers from Ukraine, from Crimea, went to fight in eastern Ukraine as well. I don't know if we can speak of organized channels, but people from Crimea who helped the annexation are definitely present in the east of Ukraine today.
Would you say that most of the people, Veronica, who weren't happy with what happened, weren't happy with the fact that Crimea is now Russian, would you say most of those people have now left and gone to Ukraine?
Well, not most of them. To some estimations, there are 20,000 people who left. Some activists, NGO workers, some businessmen who did not want to do business with Russia, who could not afford to wait for the transition period to be over. Some journalists who did not want to work in Russia, which is considered a complicated place for journalists. But 20,000 people is nothing to a total of 2 million people in Crimea. So the majority of the anti-Russians had to stay, and they resist in their own way. For example, they did not accept to take Russian citizenship, so they kept their Ukrainian citizenship and got residence permits, and now are foreigners in their own land. But they have to accept the changes, and they had to surrender in a certain way in order to be able to lead a normal life and not become complete outcasts.
Veronica, thank you very much, and thank you for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.